Chapter 1. Constantinople. The rebirth of Rome in the east. You walk along the wind-kissed shores of the Bosporus, where the waters shimmer with the light of the rising sun, and the air carries the faint scent of salt, fish, and promise. The year is 330 AD, and you stand on the cusp of history, not in the halls of the old Roman Senate, not on the steps of the Colosseum, but in a city whose name has only just been spoken aloud with imperial certainty. Constantinople. You have traveled far to witness this moment. Across the Aegean and through Thrace, you have followed the rumors of a new Rome being born in the east. Rome is not dying, you've been told. It is moving, transforming itself like a serpent shedding its skin, coiling around new lands, new peoples and new hopes. The city you enter is not yet finished. Wooden scaffolding clings to marble buildings like vines on a wall. Roads are being paved, temples consecrated, aqueducts laid with mathematical precision. Yet in the hearts of its people, the city already gleams with an imperial light. They do not speak of it as Byzantium anymore, the old Greek city that once served as a trading port on the edge of empire. They call it Constantinopolis, city of Constantine, and Constantine himself. You see him rarely, a distant figure surrounded by senators, generals, bishops. But his presence is felt everywhere. Statues rise to his glory. Edicts bear his seal. And above all, the city pulses with his vision. A Roman Empire no longer bound to the crumbling weight of the West, but reborn, cleansed, and directed by divine favor from the East. It is not merely a matter of geography, you understand that now. Rome was once a republic, then an empire, but now it is something else entirely. A Christian empire. The signs are everywhere. The Chi-Rho emblazoned on banners, the cross replacing Jupiter's eagle, the construction of grand churches even as old pagan temples stand neglected. You pass under the Arch of Constantine, its sides etched with victories, from another time, and realize that its triumphs no longer speak the same language as the city it stands in. Constantinople is a paradox. It is old and new, Roman and Greek, pagan and Christian all at once. The language you hear in the markets is Greek, but the laws are Latin. Senators wear togas, yet they discuss the Nicene Creed with fervor. Soldiers train in the style of Rome, but they march under the sign of the cross. You attend the dedication ceremony on May 11, 330. It is a grand affair. Streets are lined with garlands. Incense wafts through the air, and the sound of hymns rises like incense to the heavens. Constantine appears in his golden regalia, flanked by his sons and his court. You watch as he declares the city the new capital of the Roman Empire. Not Rome, the eternal city, but Constantinople, the eternal city of the East. He speaks not as Caesar, not even as Augustus, but almost as a prophet. He proclaims a divine mission, claiming the city as a gift from God, a bastion of Christian virtue, a light for the nations. And in that moment you understand, the Rome of old is no more. This is the Rome of the future, yet all is not as harmonious as it seems. Beneath the grand declarations and theological certainty lies unease. You hear whispers of dissent in the Senate. Traditionalists grumble about abandoning the old gods. Bishops argue over the true nature of Christ. The Council of Nicaea is still fresh in everyone's memory, and though Constantine presided over it, not all questions were answered. Arianism continues to stir unrest. Some claim the Son is not equal to the Father. Others cry heresy. You watch these debates unfold, not only in churches but in the streets, among dock workers and tradesmen. Theology is not a distant affair. It is the pulse of the empire. You follow Constantine's reforms with interest. The bureaucratic engine of the empire is reshaped. Dioceses are redrawn. Military and civil authorities are split, curbing the power of provincial governors. Gold coins bearing his image circulate through the markets. The solidus, a new standard of imperial stability. Taxes are restructured, sometimes brutally. You hear farmers complain of overreach, landowners grumble. Yet the economy somehow endures. You witness the rise of Christian imperial architecture. The Church of the Holy Apostles is begun, meant to rival the grandeur of any temple in Rome. In its shadow, the Bishop of Constantinople grows in influence, though still subordinate to Rome's pope, for now. But the seeds of rivalry are already sown. You see how power follows proximity, and the emperor listens more to the bishop at his side than the pontiff across the sea. Years pass. Constantine grows older, more reflective. He constructs his mausoleum in Constantinople, not Rome, a statement more powerful than any proclamation. He baptizes himself near the end of his life, in the Eastern Rite. It is not until his death, in 337, that you fully realize what he has wrought. The empire, once centered around a city on the Tiber, now orbits a city on the Bosporus, but his death does not bring peace. His sons divide the empire. Civil war erupts. You are caught in the chaos, watching as cousins betray cousins, as soldiers switch loyalties for coin or creed. The empire is not yet secure. The West reels under pressure from barbarian invasions, Visigoths, Vandals, Franks, while the East braces for its own challenges, yet Constantinople stands firm. Its walls, already formidable, are expanded. You walk atop the Theodosian walls, completed in the next century, and feel their strength beneath your feet. Triple layered, guarded by towers and moats, they seem to defy time itself. The city becomes a fortress as much as a capital, a bastion between worlds. And what a world it is. Constantinople becomes a melting pot of cultures. You see Persians in their silks, Goths in their leathers, Syrians trading spices, Egyptians debating theology. Latin may fade from common use, but the empire's identity does not. You are not simply a Greek, nor merely a Christian. You are Roman, but in a new sense, an Eastern Roman. This is not a retreat from history, it is a redefinition. Rome no longer needs to sit in Italy to rule the world. It lives in law, in tradition, in the very idea of imperium. And that idea now resides in Constantinople. You realize something else too. The shift eastward was not just strategic, it was spiritual. The West clung to fading grandeur, pagan vestiges, aristocratic privilege. The East embraces the new faith, the mysticism of icons, the vision of empire guided by divine will. You see it in the art, mosaics that shimmer with otherworldly golds, icons that stare into your soul. You feel it in the liturgy, where Latin yields to Greek, and incense clouds swirl like prayers rising to heaven. By the end of the century, the division between East and West is no longer just administrative. It is cultural, spiritual, almost civilizational. The emperor in Constantinople is not merely a ruler, he is God's chosen representative on earth, a protector of the true faith. When the Western Empire collapses in 476, and the last Western emperor is deposed, you are not surprised. The West dies not with a bang, but with a long drawn-out sigh. Yet in Constantinople, life goes on. Trade flows, churches ring with hymns, laws are passed, armies are raised. The empire, your empire, lives. And it will endure for centuries yet to come. You look out once more over the Bosporus, the sea sparkling beneath the morning sun, and understand the truth. The fall of Rome was not the end. It was a transformation. Rome did not perish. It became Byzantine. And you standing here in the shadow of its rising domes and echoing basilicas are its witness. Chapter 2. The Age of Justinian. Plague, power, and the dream of a restored empire, you stand beneath the colossal dome of the Hagia Sophia, and for a moment, you forget the world outside. Light streams through the windows high above, filtering through golden mosaics that shimmer like constellations. The air is thick with incense, and the haunting chant of priests reverberates through the marble-clad nave. You are not merely in a church, you are in the heart of the empire. This is the soul of Justinian's Constantinople. The year is 537, and you are living in the age of ambition. Emperor Justinian now sits on the throne, flanked by his brilliant wife Theodora and his trusted general Belisarius. He is no ordinary ruler. He is not content to reign over the remnants of Rome. He wants it all. The glory of the Caesars, the unity of the church, the unshakable authority of law. He seeks to reconquer the West, reform the state, and enshrine his legacy in stone, scripture, and steel. You've seen his city transformed. After the Nika riots nearly burned Constantinople to the ground, Justinian rebuilt it grander than ever. You remember the horror, the smoke, the flames, the screams of tens of thousands crushed in the Hippodrome when the imperial troops, on Theodora's orders, massacred the rioters. You remember her speech that changed the course of history. Royal. "Purple makes a fine burial shroud," she had said, refusing to flee. And with that, Justinian stayed, and he built. Now you walk through wide boulevards, past aqueducts, public baths, basilicas, and markets. The Hagia Sophia, completed in just 5 years, stands not just as a symbol of faith but of imperial will. It is unlike anything you've ever seen. No pagan temple, no Western church, no Eastern ziggurat compares. This is the future, a divine empire carved in marble and crowned with domes. But Justinian's vision stretches far beyond Constantinople. You watch with awe and dread as his armies march to the west. First, Belisarius sails for North Africa in 533. The Vandals fall with surprising ease. Carthage is reclaimed. Then Italy. The Gothic War begins, long and bloody. You hear tales of the siege of Rome, of treachery and starvation, of triumphs snatched from the jaws of defeat. Ravenna falls. Sicily, Dalmatia, parts of Spain, all restored to imperial rule. For a brief shining moment, it seems as if Rome has been reborn. Yet you know the cost. The wars drain the treasury, devastate the countryside, and weaken the army. While victories are won abroad, enemies lurk at home. The Persians strike from the east. Slavs and Avars raid the Balkans. And then, as if the wrath of heaven itself has descended upon the empire, the plague arrives. You remember the first rumors: sailors, sick in the harbors, strange swellings, sudden death. Then it spreads. In the streets, in the markets, in the palace. The year is 542, and the plague of Justinian sweeps through Constantinople like a scythe through wheat. You see corpses piled in carts, burned in pits, left to rot in alleyways. The city stinks of death. The priests chant day and night. The emperor himself falls ill. You fear the end has come, and yet Justinian survives. When the sickness passes, you step outside and see a different city, quieter, grayer, mourning. The empire itself has changed. The dream of restoration dims. Resources are depleted. The military, overstretched. Belisarius, once triumphant, falls into disfavor. You hear whispers of court intrigue, of eunuchs and empresses wielding unseen power. Theodora dies in 548, and with her something in Justinian breaks. But still he builds, and he writes. You read the Corpus Juris Civilis, the body of civil law, compiled at his command. It is magnificent. You marvel at its clarity, its ambition. Law for Justinian is not just order, it is justice. And justice, he believes, is divine. You watch as the emperor supports the Orthodox Church cracking down on heresies. Monophysites, Arians, Nestorians, each branded a threat to unity. The church and state march in step, and Constantinople becomes not just the capital of the empire, but the center of Christian orthodoxy. Patriarchs rival popes. Theology becomes politics. To disagree with doctrine is to defy the emperor himself, and yet even amid all this control you sense fragility. The empire is stretched thin, its borders tested, its people weary. Justinian rules until 565, dying in his palace, having never left the city since the plague. You see the shadow of death. In his final days, he dies childless. His empire, though momentarily vast, is brittle. You wonder, was it worth it? The wars, the plague, the tax burdens, the executions. You think of the churches, the laws, the reconquered lands. You think of the Hagia Sophia and the Justinian Code, which will shape law for 1,000 years. You cannot say. But you know this. Justinian was not merely a ruler. He was a force. A man who bent the world to his vision, even as it cracked under the pressure. And you, who lived through it all, bear witness not only to his greatness, but to his price. Chapter 3. The Theological Wars. Icons, Emperors, and the Crisis of Faith. You live in a world of sacred images, icons. They surround you in churches, in homes, in public squares. Painted faces of Christ, the Virgin Mary, and the saints watch over you with solemn, compassionate eyes. You have seen people kneel before them in reverence, light candles in their honor, and weep as they pray. These images are not mere decoration. To you and countless others, they are windows into heaven, bridges between the mortal and the divine. But now those sacred faces are vanishing. The year is 726. You walk the streets of Constantinople and find unrest brewing. The Emperor Leo III has ordered that all icons be removed from churches. At first it's subtle, an icon here, a painting there. Then the orders become more direct, more violent. Priests are arrested, mobs clash, monks resist. Iconoclasm, literally, the breaking of icons, has begun. You don't understand. Why would an emperor of a Christian empire attack the very heart of its faith? You learn that Leo, a soldier emperor from the eastern provinces, believes that God's wrath is upon the Empire. Earthquakes, Arab invasions, the eruption of Thera. These are signs, he claims. The empire has fallen into idolatry. The veneration of images, he says, is blasphemy. It offends the divine order. Some agree. You hear voices calling for a return to spiritual purity. The Old Testament forbade graven images, they remind you. Christ must be worshipped in spirit, not in paint. The emperors, as God's regents on earth, must purify the church, but many more resist. You watch as bishops protest, as monks go into hiding, as whole communities rise up in defense of icons. In Italy, the Pope himself denounces Leo's decree. The western provinces, already drifting from Constantinople, see this as tyranny. A theological rift deepens into political fracture. You see icons being torn from sanctuaries, burned in the streets. In their place, crosses, bare and stark, stand on empty walls. The churches feel cold now, hollow. You witness old women clutching, tiny icons in secret, monks whispering hymns in catacombs, martyrs dying for painted wood. The battle lines are drawn, not only between the emperor and his people, but within the church itself. For over a century, the empire will tear itself. Fought over this question: iconoclasts against iconodules, imperial power against spiritual devotion. You live through the reign of Constantine V, Leo's son, who takes iconoclasm to new extremes. He persecutes monks with a fury. The famous monastery of Staudios in Constantinople becomes a fortress of resistance. You hear of monks having their eyes gouged, tongues cut out, sent into exile. Yet they endure. They preserve icons in secret, paint them on scraps of cloth, bury them in walls. You begin to see what's at stake. This is not merely about images. It's about who controls the soul of the empire. Is it the emperor, chosen by God to govern all? Or is it the church with its ancient traditions and living saints? You realize that this is a war for identity, between East and West, between Caesar and Christ, but iconoclasm does not last forever. In 787, under Empress Irene, the tide turns. You watch as bishops gather at the Second Council of Nicaea. They debate scripture, tradition, and philosophy. And in the end, they affirm what the people already knew, that icons are not idols, but symbols, that Christ, who became flesh, can be depicted. That art can serve the truth. Icons return to the churches. Mosaics bloom across the walls once more. Gold and color and beauty are restored. The people rejoice. You attend a procession through the streets, holding candles, singing hymns. You kiss the face of the Virgin with tears in your eyes. For now, the image of God is welcome again. Yet the struggle is not over. Decades later, under Emperor Leo V, iconoclasm is revived. The images are once more removed. Another generation of persecution begins. You wonder how long this cycle will last. Faith shattered and restored, sacred art destroyed and reborn. It will take until 843, with the Empress Theodora and the triumph of orthodoxy, for the final restoration of icons to become permanent. You walk once more through the Hagia Sophia and see the image of the Virgin Mary high above the apse, her arms open in welcome, a symbol not only of piety, but of resilience. You have survived over a century of theological war. You have seen emperors rise and fall over doctrine. You have seen the church divided, then healed. You now understand that in Byzantium, theology is not abstract. It is life. It shapes law, culture, even battle. A single belief can change an empire. A single image can spark a revolution. And as you stand before an icon, aged, scarred, yet still luminous, you feel not only awe but defiance. The face before you has survived fire, exile, and empire, and so have you. Chapter 4. The Macedonian Renaissance. Learning, conquest, and the Golden Revival. You awaken in a city transformed. Constantinople, once shaken by theological wars and battered by civil unrest, now pulses with the confident heartbeat of a revitalized empire. The streets are bustling, the markets vibrant, and the skyline, crowned by the enduring dome of Hagia Sophia, glows in the Mediterranean sun like a jewel of civilization. You are living in the era of the Macedonian dynasty, an age that would later be remembered as a golden chapter in Byzantine history. It begins with an unlikely figure, Basil I, born in the humble countryside of Thrace or Macedonia, possibly of Armenian or Slavic descent. Basil's origins are obscure. Wrapped in both legend and speculation, you hear stories of how he worked with his hands, slept in stables, and rose from nothing to become the emperor of Rome's Eastern legacy. His story seems pulled from a fable, yet you witness its echoes everywhere. In the art, the literature, the triumphant tone of the empire's new voice. You are now under the rule of a dynasty, determined to rebuild Byzantium's glory, not only through conquest, but through culture. Under Basil and his successors, especially Leo VI the Wise and Constantine VII Porphyrogenitus, the empire rediscovers the richness of its Greco-Roman inheritance. You walk through the imperial libraries, newly restored and expanded, and see scribes at work copying ancient manuscripts. Works of Aristotle, Homer, Galen, texts once threatened by time and war are rescued and revered. In schools and monasteries, classical learning flourishes alongside Christian theology. You hear scholars debate in the palace halls, quoting Plato and Paul in the same breath. The church remains dominant, but it now walks hand in hand with philosophy, art, and reason. Constantinople becomes not just the political heart of an empire, but a beacon of learning for the entire Christian world. You. Notice how everything begins to change, how the very language of state and church becomes more refined, more eloquent. Law codes are reorganized and rewritten. The Basilica, a massive legal compilation in Greek, replaces the outdated Latin codes, making justice more accessible. You see its influence in courtrooms, in city councils, in daily life. Byzantium, so often torn by internal contradictions, is now attempting to bring coherence, order, and beauty to its civilization. Yet this revival is not confined to ink and parchment. On the frontiers of the empire, armies march under renewed banners. You hear of generals like Nikephoros Phocas and John Tzimiskes, brilliant commanders who recover lands long lost to the Arabs. Cities like Antioch and parts of northern Syria return to imperial control. These victories, born of discipline and daring, are not merely military, they are spiritual. Each reconquest feels like a divine reclamation, a piece of the old Roman order made whole again. You ride with soldiers across Anatolia and witness the discipline of the Byzantine army, once fractured by incompetence, now restructured and formidable. The themes, regional military units are revitalized, tactics evolve, fortresses are strengthened, and the empire begins to feel once more like an empire. Within the capital, the arts reflect this growing confidence. You enter churches newly adorned with gold mosaics and see Christ Pantocrator, the all-powerful ruler of the universe, looming over the sanctuary with a gaze both commanding and serene. Architecture, music, and iconography all bear the signature of this Renaissance. Bold yet reverent, rooted in the past, yet looking to the future. At court, you witness the curious mixture of pageantry and policy. Ceremonies become more elaborate, full of incense, robes, and meticulously choreographed rituals. The emperor becomes almost divine, seated at the apex of a sacred hierarchy. You feel the awe this inspires in foreign envoys, who return to the West with stories of a capital where marble fountains sing, mechanical lions roar, and the emperor's throne rises as if by magic. And yet, despite the spectacle, there is substance. You listen to Constantine VII, scholar, statesman, and author, dictate instructions for ruling an empire. His De Administrando Imperio becomes a handbook for future generations. You read his works and marvel at his insight, his understanding of both the internal affairs of Byzantium and the barbarian tribes beyond its borders. Here is a ruler who does not merely wield power, but seeks to understand it. But this age is not without shadows. You witness political intrigue, the palace coups, the poisonings, the whispered betrayals in darkened corridors. The empire's greatness is still fragile. Basil's own rise to power was marked by blood, and so too is the history of his successors. Generals who win glory abroad often find themselves murdered at home. Empresses rule as regents, then vanish when power no longer needs them. You come to understand that in Byzantium, intelligence and ruthlessness often walk hand in hand. Religion, too, remains a field of conflict. Heresies continue to emerge, some new, some ancient. The empire must always guard its doctrine with vigilance. You attend church councils, watch bishops argue over obscure theological phrases, and realize that one misplaced word can lead to schism, even war. Even so, you feel that Byzantium has found a kind of balance. You stand in a monastery and see monks, copying not only the Gospels, but the works of Euclid and Ptolemy. You walk through a city where ancient Roman aqueducts flow beside new churches crowned with shining domes. You observe peasants in the countryside who can now live in relative peace, protected by imperial troops and administered by capable bureaucrats. The empire's borders are secure. Trade flows from east to west. You smell the spices of India in the markets of Constantinople. You hear the tongues of Slavs, Armenians, Italians, and Arabs all mingling in the streets. The empire is once more a crossroads, not just of trade, but of culture, knowledge, and faith. And as you look back at this age, you realize what it means to live through a renaissance. It is not just the return of ancient knowledge or the glitter of gold on church walls. It is the rekindling of belief, in order, in justice, in a destiny that is greater than any one ruler. Byzantium, so long a fortress under siege, has become a temple of civilization once more. But you know deep down that the golden light is not eternal. The forces that once threatened the empire, internal rivalries, external enemies, the rising powers of the West, are not gone. They wait as they always do beyond the horizon. For now, though, you walk the streets of Constantinople under the Macedonian emperors, and you believe, perhaps for the first time in generations, that the empire will endure. You believe that the heirs of Rome have finally reclaimed their legacy. Chapter 5. Schism and Steel. The great divide between East and West, you stand at the edge of a fissure that has been forming for centuries, slowly widening beneath your feet. For generations, the Roman Empire has lived in two halves, one Latin, one Greek, one centered in the ruins of Rome, the other in the splendor of Constantinople. But now in this moment, you sense that the rift is no longer theoretical. It is real, irreversible. The Christian world, once united under one church, one creed, one God, is about to be torn in two. You are a citizen of the Byzantine Empire, a Greek Christian walking through the heart of Constantinople. You speak the language of Plato, pray in the liturgy of St. John Chrysostom, and live under the shadow of the great church, Hagia Sophia. You have always felt that your empire is the rightful continuation of the Roman world. You have emperors, laws, armies, and traditions that stretch back to Augustus himself. And you believe that your church, the Orthodox Church, is the truest heir of Christ's teachings. But in the West, across the Adriatic Sea, things are changing. The Pope in Rome, once a respected bishop among equals, now claims authority over all Christianity. You hear whispers of how the Franks under Charlemagne crowned themselves as Holy Roman Emperors, a title that makes your blood boil. How can there be a Roman emperor in the West when the true empire still stands in the East? This arrogance of the Latin Church festers over time. It begins with subtle insults. Latin missionaries in Slavic lands teaching doctrines that contradict. Orthodox belief changes to the Nicene Creed, introduced without Eastern approval, and the Pope's increasing use of the filioque, a phrase that alters the very heart of the Holy Trinity. You hear it debated in the marketplaces, in monasteries, and in the halls of imperial power. Who speaks for God? Who preserves the true faith? The theological arguments are dense about the nature of the Holy Spirit, the primacy of the Bishop of Rome, the leavening of bread used in the Eucharist, but beneath the doctrine lies a deeper tension: power. The Byzantine Emperor wants to remain the head of both church and state, as Constantine had once envisioned. The Pope wants independence, authority, supremacy, and so the two sides drift apart. You see the final rupture approaching like a thunderstorm on the horizon. The events unfold slowly, then all at once. It is 1054. You stand in Hagia Sophia, the most sacred space in your world, and watch in disbelief as papal legates storm into the church. They place a bull of excommunication on the altar and declare the Patriarch of Constantinople, Michael Cerularius, outside the Church of Rome. You feel the air grow cold. The Patriarch responds by excommunicating the papal envoys in return. You have just witnessed the Great Schism, a moment that will divide the Christian world forever. From this day forward, East and West are no longer partners in faith. The Latin Church becomes Roman Catholic, and your church becomes Eastern Orthodox. The two sides, once two lungs of the same body, now breathe hostility. You feel the shock ripple through every layer of society. Merchants begin to speak less freely with their Western counterparts. Diplomats grow colder, more suspicious, and the people, your neighbors, your priests, your teachers, start to describe the West not as fellow Christians, but as foreigners. Worse, as heretics. Yet this spiritual divide does not remain merely theological. It bleeds into steel, into politics, into war. The Norman adventurers in southern Italy, Latin Christians loyal to the Pope, attack and seize Byzantine territories. You watch as once loyal provinces fall into enemy hands. The emperor sends envoys to Rome pleading for aid, for reconciliation, but pride has hardened both hearts. The Pope does not yield. You remember the bitterness of the Crusades, launched from the west with cries of reclaiming the Holy Land. When Pope Urban II calls for the First Crusade in 1095, the Byzantine Emperor Alexios I Komnenos sees a glimmer of hope. Perhaps these Western knights can be allies. He allows them passage through his lands, feeds their armies, and hopes to recover lost territory. But what follows is chaos. You meet knights who speak no Greek, who look down on your culture and faith. They pillage towns, steal from your people, and mock your icons. Some openly call you traitors to the true faith. You learn quickly that these crusaders are not interested in restoring Byzantium's glory. They are interested in their own. Still, you try to maintain hope. The First Crusade succeeds in capturing Jerusalem. You celebrate briefly, hoping that unity may be restored through shared victory. But it is not to be. The divide is too deep. A century later, in the year 1204, the unthinkable happens. You stand once more in Constantinople, your home, your crown jewel, and watch in horror as the Crusaders, the armies of the West, turn their swords not against Muslims, but against Christians. Against you. The Fourth Crusade, manipulated by greed, debt, and Venetian ambition, marches upon Constantinople. You are there when the walls fall. You hear the screams of your neighbors as knights storm into the city. Churches are looted. Icons are shattered. Sacred relics are stolen and sent to cathedrals in France and Italy. Nuns are raped. Priests are murdered. Gold and jewels are ripped from the altars of Hagia Sophia. This is no longer a schism of theology. It is betrayal. It is desecration. You weep as the city falls into flames, not to infidels, but to Christians. The Latin Empire of Constantinople is established in the ruins of your home, a puppet regime propped up by Western conquerors. For 57 years you live under foreign rule. You watch your culture suppressed, your church mocked, your people scattered, but the flame does not die. In 1261, with the help of loyal allies, the Byzantines recapture Constantinople. You cheer as the last Latin emperor flees. The Orthodox Church returns. The liturgy echoes once more in Greek through the halls of Hagia Sophia. And yet something has changed. The city is wounded. The empire is smaller, weaker, and surrounded by enemies. The schism remains. The West has not apologized. Rome and Constantinople are now rivals, not brothers. You understand now that the Christian world will never be whole again. This is your reality. You live in a civilization where theology and politics intertwine, where the sword of faith can be turned against fellow believers. You have seen the heights of learning, the brilliance of mosaic and manuscript, but also the darkness that pride and power can unleash. The schism is not just a moment in time. It is a wound that will fester for centuries, and you, citizen of Byzantium, must now carry the burden of a divided Christendom. You must fight not only for survival, but for the soul of the empire itself. Chapter 6. The Comnenian Gamble. Reform, revival, and the march to peril. You awaken to the cold weight of a broken empire. It is the year 1081, and the proud Eastern Roman Empire, once stretching from the Adriatic to the Levant, is now but a flickering shadow. The military is weakened, the treasury drained, and enemies crowd your borders like wolves around a dying stag. You are a citizen of Constantinople, and you know that your people crave more than hope. They need a savior. Into this storm steps Alexios vs Komnenos. You watch him rise with the poise of a seasoned general, his eyes hardened by war and betrayal. He is young, ambitious, and determined to save Byzantium. When the imperial crown settles upon his head, it is not with ease, it is with urgency. The empire is fractured. The Seljuk Turks ravage Anatolia, your heartland. The Normans press from the west, and corruption infects the core of the state. Alexios acts swiftly. You observe him rebuild the crumbling military, not through conscription, but through a network of loyal aristocrats and mercenaries. He re-establishes the pronoia system, land grants in exchange for military service, restoring an old Roman ideal with new ambition. Gold is scarce, so Alexios turns to diplomacy, even if it means making dangerous promises to dangerous men. And then, in one of the most pivotal moments of your life, you witness an act no emperor before him dared. He writes to the west for help, Indii. 1095, envoys of Alexios travel to the Council of Piacenza and plead with Pope Urban II. They speak of the Seljuk threat, of the desecration of Christian lands, of the need for warriors. The Pope, seizing the moment, transforms the appeal into something far greater. You remember the echoes of his words, Deus vult, God wills it. Thus the First Crusade is born. You stand at the gates of Constantinople as the first waves of crusaders arrive, not one army, but many, chaotic and undisciplined. You are both awed and afraid. Their numbers are vast, their hunger insatiable. They do not speak your language, and many scoff at your customs. You hear some call you heretics, idolaters, Greeks instead of Romans. Alexios, ever cunning, extracts oaths of loyalty from their leaders. He promises them passage and support in exchange for the return of any lands conquered that once belonged to Byzantium. Some agree, others grumble. You follow the journey as the Crusaders, with Byzantine support, sweep through Anatolia, taking back Nicaea and Antioch. It feels like a rebirth. For the first time in decades, the empire expands rather than shrinks. Alexios becomes a master puppeteer, using the zeal of others to reclaim what is yours. But you know better than to trust too easily. The Crusaders do not return your lands. They carve out Latin principalities, Antioch, Edessa, Tripoli, nominally allied with Byzantium but practically independent. The seeds of betrayal are planted even as Alexios builds alliances and secures victories. You walk the streets of Constantinople in these years of fragile resurgence. Art flourishes once more. Trade resumes. The Comnenian emperors, Alexios followed by John II and then Manuel I, bring an air of confidence back to the imperial court. You hear Greek and Latin spoken in the palace. You see treaties with Venice, Hungary, and even Muslim rulers. It is a careful balancing act. You watch as John II, the Good, rules with virtue and humility, choosing integrity over spectacle. He reforms the military and strengthens the treasury. He leads campaigns in the Balkans and Anatolia with quiet brilliance. He is loved by the people, and when he dies of a hunting accident, the empire weeps. Then comes Manuel I, the Golden Emperor. You see a different Byzantium under his rule, more Western, more chivalric. Manuel loves tournaments, Western court customs, and the company of Latin knights. He marries a Frankish princess and brings a cosmopolitan flair to the court. His armies march into Italy and Egypt, and for a moment, it feels as though Byzantium could become a global power once more. But ambition is a double-edged sword. You follow Manuel's campaigns and feel the tension mounting. He stretches the empire thin. His diplomacy becomes reckless. His admiration for the West blinds him to its dangers. And then, in 1176, disaster strikes. You remember the name Myriokephalon, a narrow mountain pass in Anatolia where Manuel leads his forces against the Seljuk Turks. You hear the reports of ambush, confusion, slaughter. The defeat is total. Manuel returns, but the dream of reclaiming Anatolia dies on that blood-soaked trail. Still, Manuel holds the empire together. But you see the cracks forming. You feel the weight of aging glory. The Komnenian system, reliant on imperial charisma and family loyalty, begins to buckle. There is no strong successor. The aristocracy grows greedy. The church becomes restless. The people, once uplifted, now sense decline beneath the gilded surface. And then in 1180, Manuel dies. His son, Alexios II, is just a boy. You see the empire enter a storm of intrigue, regencies, assassinations, coups. The old stability is gone. The aristocratic families feud openly, and opportunists rise in the shadows. You hear the name Andronikos de Komnenos, a man once exiled, now returning with promises of reform and vengeance. You watch him seize power with brutality. He purges. The court executes rivals and claims the throne. But his rule is short, his cruelty unmatched. In 1185, the people rise against him. You witness his lynching in the streets, his body torn apart by a mob. It is a warning to all emperors who forget the balance of mercy and might. Now, you live in a land teetering between revival and ruin. The Komnenian dynasty, which gave the empire its last true golden age, ends in chaos. The borders are fragile. The West grows impatient. The Latins see Byzantium as decadent, weak, ripe for conquest. The seeds of the next catastrophe are already sown, but you remember the glories. You remember how Alexios gambled with the future and won, if only for a time. You remember how faith, cunning, and courage brought light into the darkness, and you wonder if it can happen again. Chapter 7. The Lions Fall. The sack of Constantinople and the Latin yoke. You awake to uncertainty. The streets of Constantinople no longer echo with the confidence of the Komnenoi. The wind carries rumors now of treason, of Western armies amassing beyond the sea, of a storm rising from lands that once answered to your empire. You are a child of Byzantium, and you feel it in your bones. Something is ending. It begins with ambition, not yours, not your cities, but of outsiders. The West, once a begrudging ally during the First Crusade, now sees Byzantium not as a brother in Christ, but as an aging lion guarding a treasure hoard. The year is 1195 when the tide first begins to shift. You watch with concern as Isaac II, Angelos, weak and ineffective, is deposed by his own brother, Alexios III. You see no great protest in the streets. The people have grown used to change. Emperors come and go, but the city endures. Or so you think, but this time the consequences will be catastrophic. In the West, in the ports of Venice, a new crusade is being formed, not to help Byzantium, but to retake the Holy Land. You hear their preachers speak of Jerusalem, of sacred vengeance, of God's will. But the plan falters. The Crusaders lack gold. The Venetians, led by their calculating Doge Enrico Dandolo, offer a bargain. Attack the Christian city of Zara first, and their debts will be forgiven. You gasp. A Christian army raised to fight infidels now turns on Christian cities. It is the first sin in a chain that will damn them. And then, like a vulture sensing weakness, another figure enters. Alexios IV, son of the deposed Isaac II. He flees to the Crusaders, promising them glory and riches if they help him reclaim his throne. The Crusaders, already in debt and adrift, seize the offer. You remember the year, 1203. The Crusaders arrive not in Jerusalem, but at the gates of Constantinople, you rush to the walls with your neighbors, watching as Latin sails blacken the horizon. You clutch icons, cross yourself, beg God for deliverance. But this time, the walls of Theodosius do not save you. The Crusaders breach the city, and Alexios IV is installed as co-emperor beside his blinded father. But the city despises him. He is seen as a traitor, a puppet of the West. He cannot pay his debts to the Crusaders. Anger boils, riots erupt, mobs roam the streets, attacking Latins, destroying churches. You witness a city tearing itself apart from within. In 1204, Alexios IV is overthrown and strangled. Chaos follows. The Crusaders, enraged and unpaid, decide they've had enough. You stand on the walls one last time as they come again. But this time not as pretenders to help. This time they come as conquerors. You cannot forget that day. April 13th, 1204, a date etched into your soul. You see them pour into the city, sword and torch in hand. No church is sacred, no house is safe. The air is thick with screams and smoke. You watch as the Hagia Sophia, the jewel of Christendom, is desecrated. Latin knights stable their horses in its sacred halls. The altar is looted. Gold, icons, relics, all stolen. Nuns are raped, priests are butchered, children are taken as slaves. You cower in a ruined house, praying the screams pass you by. The city burns not for a day, but for 3. Fires consume neighborhoods that stood since Justinian's time. Libraries are lost, scrolls turn to ash. 1,000 years of Roman glory falls into dust, and when the smoke clears, Constantinople no longer belongs to you. The Crusaders divide your empire like wolves at a carcass. They call it the Latin Empire of Constantinople. A Western emperor now sits on your throne. The Venetians take control of the harbors and trade. Greek churches are seized and Latin priests installed. Your culture, your language, your traditions, mocked, ignored, suppressed. You live now in humiliation. Many flee, others resist in whispers. The nobility and clergy scatter to the edges of the fallen empire, trying to preserve something, anything of what was lost. But amidst the ashes, embers smolder. You hear of resistance movements rising in exile. Nicaea, Epirus, Trebizond. Byzantine successor states ruled by Greeks, each claiming to be the true heir. In Nicaea under Theodore III Lascaris, a new capital emerges. It is not the queen of cities, but it is a beginning. The church regroups, armies are trained. For 50 years you cling to the hope that one day the eagle will return to the Bosphorus. But for now you survive in a city ruled by strangers, forced to kneel before the Latin cross, your own liturgies silenced. You are a ghost in your own home. And yet, you remember. You remember the mosaics of the Hagia Sophia before they were stripped. You remember the sound of bells calling your people to the divine liturgy. You remember the proud eyes of your ancestors and the vows whispered in dark places. We will return, for now the lion has fallen. But lions, even when wounded, do not die easily, and so you wait for vengeance, for justice, for the day when Constantinople rises again. Chapter 8. The Phoenix rises, the Paleologan restoration and the last flame of empire. You open your eyes to a world where Byzantium is broken, but not dead. It has been decades since the horror of 1204, and though Constantinople remains under Latin control, the soul of Byzantium survives, fractured, exiled, but fiercely alive. You walk the streets not of the Queen of Cities, but of Nicaea, now a makeshift capital where the displaced Byzantine spirit endures. Here, under Theodore III Lascaris, you find a semblance of order. He is no emperor crowned in Hagia Sophia, but he wears the purple and calls himself Basileus nonetheless. You are among refugees, priests, soldiers, and scribes who refuse to kneel to the Latin usurpers. In smoky candlelit halls, liturgies continue in Greek. Children are taught Homer and the Gospels. Hope, like a flickering oil lamp, is kept alive. You spend your youth watching Nicaea rise, not in splendor but in resolve. Armies are trained, alliances formed. In Epirus, another Greek state emerges. In Trebizond, a cousin of the Komnenoi crowns himself emperor beside the Black Sea. Byzantium now lives in 3 hearts, each beating with its own rhythm, but only one can reclaim the true inheritance. As the decades pass, the Latin Empire in Constantinople weakens. You hear of infighting, of Western princes squabbling over their spoils. The Venetians grow greedy, the Latin emperor grows desperate. Constantinople, you are told, is a shadow of what it was. The great churches stand looted, the population thinned, the city decaying under foreign rule. Then comes Michael Faith Palaiologos, a man whose name will define the next dynasty of your people. You first hear of him as a general, then as a regent of Nicaea. But he is no mere caretaker. He is brilliant, ruthless, and determined to return Byzantium to its throne. By 1261, he is ready. You stand once more at the edge of destiny. In the darkness of a summer night, Nicaean troops led by Alexios Strategopoulos approach Constantinople. They expect to scout, not to act. But fortune smiles. The Latin garrison is gone, off fighting elsewhere. A gate is left open. With bated breath you wait for news. And then it comes. The Romans have returned. You cannot contain your tears. After 57 years of exile, Constantinople is reclaimed. You rush to the city with others, walking through gates that once seemed forever closed. The streets are half empty, the buildings ruined, but it is home. The churches ring again with Greek chant. Michael VIII enters Hagia Sophia, not as a conqueror but as a restorer. You stand among the crowd as he is crowned, and the choir sings Axios. The Palaiologan restoration has begun, but glory, you soon learn, comes at a price. Michael blinds the rightful boy emperor John IV Lascaris to secure his own power, an act that poisons his legacy. The West, furious at the loss of Constantinople, calls for new crusades. The Pope excommunicates Michael. You sense storm clouds building again. Still, Michael presses forward. He fortifies the city, rebuilds the walls, and seeks alliances. He offers church union with Rome, not from faith but from political necessity. You watch with unease as bishops debate Latin rites and Greek liturgies. The people resist. You resist. For while your city may have fallen once to Latin swords, your soul refuses Latin prayers. After Michael's death, his successors inherit a crown heavy with contradictions. Andronikos X, his son, reigns for decades. You grow old in his time, watching as he disbands the navy to save gold, as Turkish tribes seize Asia Minor, and as civil war weakens the realm. The Mongols thunder across the east, the Serbs rise in the Balkans, the Ottoman Turks, once mercenaries, now warlords, begin carving out a new kingdom from Byzantine flesh. By the early 14th century, the empire is Byzantium in name only. You watch helplessly as cities fall one by one. Nicaea, once your refuge, is lost. Nicomedia follows. Your borders recede to the sea. Constantinople remains, but barely. Within its walls you see magnificence and decay in equal measure. Scholars debate Plato while beggars starve in the alleys. Twice civil war shatters the state. First between Andronikos II and his grandson, Andronikos III. Then between John V Palaiologos and rival claimants. You count the years in bloodshed and sieges. The Ottomans grow ever stronger. You hear their prayers echo across Asia Minor, and you know they are not coming for peace. In your final years, you see Byzantium reduced to a city-state, an empire in name, a memory in fact. Yet still Constantinople endures. Its churches shine gold in the sun. Its people walk with quiet pride. You teach your grandchildren Greek letters, the Psalms, the tales of Homer and Alexander, and you remind them, you are Romans, you are Byzantines. You are the last flame of the ancient world, even as the shadows gather and the wolves howl at the gates once more. Chapter 9. The End of Empire, Constantine X and the Fall of Constantinople. You are old now, yet your heart still beats with the rhythm of 1,000 years of empire. You have watched emperors rise and fall, cities burn and be rebuilt, and the great tides of history crash upon your people like relentless waves. But now, as you stand upon the ramparts of Constantinople, staring out at the vast Ottoman army camped before the walls, you feel something different in the air. Finality. The year is 1453. You live in a world no longer dominated by Byzantium. The empire, once stretching from Italy to the Euphrates, now consists of little more than Constantinople, a few scattered ports, and ancient titles whispered more out of respect than reality. Yet you remain proud. Proud of your faith, your history, your city. For Constantinople is more than land, it is an idea, a beacon, the last torch of Roman civilization, and at its center stands a man worthy of its legacy, Constantine V Palaiologos. From the moment you lay eyes upon him, you sense his burden, not just as emperor, but as the final guardian of an entire civilization. He is not Michael VIII, whose ambition burned like wildfire, nor is he the philosopher kings of old. Constantine is a soldier, a patriot, and a man who knows he may be writing his own epitaph. You see him walk the streets among commoners, praying in Hagia Sophia, inspecting the walls, lifting the spirits of those who have nothing left but courage. He does not command legions, only a few thousand Greeks, Genoese, and volunteers who believe in something larger than themselves. Among them is Giovanni Justiniani, a formidable Genoese captain who takes charge of the defenses. Your city is surrounded by the forces of Sultan Mehmed II, a boy not yet 22, but already determined to claim the city his ancestors failed to conquer. They call him Mehmed the Conqueror. You hear whispers of his brilliance, his ruthless focus, and his dream of becoming the heir not just to the Ottomans, but to Rome itself. You wake each morning to the sound of cannons, giant, thunderous beasts that tear into the Theodosian walls. These are no ordinary weapons. Mehmed has commissioned Orban, a Hungarian engineer, to build monstrous siege artillery. The greatest of them, the Basilica, shakes the earth itself when it fires. Stone and ghee. Mortarfall. Dust clouds rise. Every day you work alongside neighbors and monks, repairing breaches, reinforcing ramparts, praying. Every night, you sleep with the knowledge that tomorrow may be the last, and yet for weeks the city holds. April turns into May. The spring air smells of blood, sweat, and incense. You see processions winding through the streets, priests carrying icons, children singing hymns, tears in every eye. You whisper the same prayer as your ancestors. Lord, have mercy on us, but inside you know, time is not on your side. The Genoese ships bring some supplies, but no great army arrives. The Pope promises aid, but it is too little, too late. Western Europe, still torn by its own squabbles, does not come. You watch the horizon, hoping for sails that never appear. And then on the night of May 28th, everything changes. You gather in Hagia Sophia, now more sanctuary than church, more tomb than temple. Every man, woman, and child capable of standing comes to pray. The candles flicker like stars in the dim cathedral. You watch Constantine kneel before the altar. His armor gleams, but his face is solemn. He asks forgiveness for his sins. He embraces his commanders. He does not weep. He knows. You all know. This is the end. At dawn on May 29th, the final assault begins. You take your place on the walls. The key. Ground shakes beneath the Ottoman charge. Waves of soldiers surge forward, janissaries, Anatolian auxiliaries, irregulars hungry for loot and glory. The great cannon roars again and again, tearing through the weakened walls. Justiniani fights like a lion, but soon he is struck, wounded. Panic ripples through the defenders. The breach grows, chaos unfolds. You see Constantine for the last time, sword drawn, leading a final charge into the storm. He vanishes into the crush, and no one ever sees him again. The gates are thrown open. The city is lost. You flee through the back alleys, watching as Mehmed's troops pour in. Smoke fills the sky. Fires consume the neighborhoods you once called home. Hagia Sophia becomes a place of terror, its doors barred by refugees, its silence shattered by screams. Icons fall, crosses break, and then the flag of Islam rises above the city. But something unexpected happens. Mehmed does not burn Constantinople to the ground. He claims it, not as a destroyer, but as a successor. He enters Hagia Sophia, orders it converted into a mosque, and prays in it himself. He walks the streets not with wild triumph, but calculated vision. He declares, "This is now my capital." He will rule not just as a sultan, but as the new Caesar. You survive somehow. You hide. You wait. and in the days that follow, you emerge into a changed world. Mehmed allows many Christians to live, even appoints a new patriarch. He respects the city's grandeur, its genius, its spirit. But you know, the Byzantine Empire is no more. 9 centuries of Roman rule in the East, gone. You gather with others in secret, telling stories of Constantine, Justinian, Basil, and Theodora. You teach your children Greek, scripture, and history. You tell them of the days when Byzantium lit the world, and even in defeat, you remember. You were the heirs of Rome. You were the shield of Christendom. You were Byzantium, and you endured until the very last day. Chapter 10. Legacy Eternal. Byzantium. After the fall, you live now in a world transformed. The banners that once bore the double-headed eagle of Byzantium have fallen. The marble halls of emperors now echo with foreign prayers, and the voice of the Roman Empire, once resounding from the Bosphorus to the Euphrates, has gone silent. And yet, as you walk the narrow alleys of Constantinople, or sit in candlelit chapels deep in hidden catacombs, you feel it. The legacy of Byzantium still breathes. The empire has died, but its soul endures. You are no longer citizen of a state. You are now part of a memory, an identity that cannot be conquered by steel or cannon fire. The Ottomans have claimed the city, but they cannot erase the past written in stone and spirit. Your people survive. The churches may now serve another faith, but the rites, the stories, the melodies of Byzantium pass from lips to ears in secret or in exile. Many of your kin flee westward, to Venetian harbors, to Rome, to Florence. They carry with them manuscripts, icons, memories. They settle in villages and courts where the Greek tongue still rolls like poetry. Among these refugees are scholars, theologians, and sages, men who carry not only books, but the last embers of ancient knowledge. It is in Italy, in those cities of Renaissance, that the forgotten brilliance of Byzantium finds new soil. You watch as Greek is studied again, not as a dead language, but as a bridge to Plato, Aristotle, and the fathers of the Church. Byzantine monks teach Latin students the secrets of orthodox theology and ancient metaphysics. Philosophers like Gemistos Plethon, once mocked in the West, are now admired. You begin to see the rebirth of the classical world, and you recognize its roots, not only Roman or Greek, but unmistakably Byzantine. Yet Byzantium's legacy is not only intellectual, it is spiritual. Across Eastern Europe, in the lands of Serbia, Bulgaria, and especially Russia, the fall of Constantinople sends a shiver. For centuries, these lands had looked to the Byzantine emperor as the protector of orthodoxy. Now that mantle is empty, and someone must bear it. It is in Moscow that the idea takes root, that the Tsar is the new Caesar, and that Moscow is the third Rome. The first Rome fell to heresies and barbarians. The second Rome, your Constantinople, fell to the infidel. But the third shall stand. You witness how Russian princes adopt Byzantine rites, dress, architecture. The Kremlin is crowned with domes that echo Hagia Sophia. The Tsar's coronation mimics the Byzantine ceremony. Even the Orthodox cross with its slanted footbar spreads across Russian lands, an echo of the empire you once called home. The double-headed eagle rises again, not on the Bosphorus but over the Volga. Meanwhile, in the West, your cultural ghost haunts Rome, where popes erect basilicas in styles drawn from the East. In Ravenna, in Venice, even in Paris, mosaics glisten with Byzantine gold. Icons find their way into chapels, Byzantine chants into liturgies. The scholars who fled Constantinople become teachers to future generations. You are everywhere and nowhere. Time passes, centuries roll by. You are born again in the minds of archaeologists and historians, of dreamers and poets. Romantic painters portray Constantinople as the lost city of glory. Historians reconstruct your past from shattered tiles and faded scrolls. Scholars debate whether Byzantium was the last Roman Empire or the first modern state. They argue, but they remember. And in Istanbul, once Constantinople, the very stones of the city whisper your name. The Hagia Sophia still stands, her dome defiant against the skyline. The Hippodrome lies buried, but beneath it the cries of chariots still echo faintly. The walls, though crumbling, still trace the outline of a civilization that refused to die. You see tourists walk the same streets. Your ancestors once marched in. You see Greek priests light candles in side chapels. You hear young voices chant in tongues thought forgotten. The Byzantines, they say, were too conservative, too proud, too mystical to survive. But you smile, because you know survival takes many forms. You are in the Orthodox faith, practiced in the slums of Cairo, the monasteries of Mount Athos, and the cathedrals of Serbia. You are in the Byzantine rite, still performed in Lebanon, Ukraine, and Albania. You are in the philosophies of empire, the idea that state and faith can coexist in sacred unity. You are in the very idea of the East, not as a mystery, but as a civilization. And when modern Greece rises from the ashes of Ottoman rule, your memory returns in full force. The new Greek state, founded in the 19th century, does not merely look back to Pericles and Socrates. It reveres Constantine, Justinian, Basil. Your flag may be different, but your spirit guides them. The echoes continue. In literature, Byzantium becomes a metaphor for beauty, for decadence, for resilience. W.B. Yeats dreams of the eternal city in his verse. Historians like Stephen Runciman elevate your story into epic tragedy. You are no longer just an empire. You are myth, legacy, warning, and inspiration. Your fall was not an end. It was a transformation. You were never just walls and armies. You were an idea, a torch, a guardian. And even as the world moves on, as empires rise and fall, you remain in the hearts of those who study, who sing, who pray in your memory. You are the golden bridge between ancient Rome and modern Europe. You are the heir of Caesar, the keeper of Christ, the soul of an age. You are Byzantium, and you are eternal.